Bruchim Habayim, everyone. We are doing chapter 13 and maybe part of 14 as well.
Which page?
Which page? I don't know. Shmuel, the book of Shmuel.
13, right?
13. Yud Gimel.
Right.
So everyone online hears me, right? If anyone online has a question, put it in the chat. It's recording. Okay, Bruchim Habayim. Perek Yud Gimel, quick recap of what we did last week. Shmuel Hanavi is parting with everyone. He's telling them basically his last will and testament to the people, something fairly predictable. If you follow the Torah and you follow the way of God, your king will help you. If you don't, you and your king will both disappear. There's no guarantees. The king can't redeem you, and he's not your savior. He's not going to do the work that you hope the king would do for you. The king is going to fulfill, and any leader, any rabbi, any person that you look up to, he can fulfill a role as an administrator. He can fulfill a role as someone who inspires you. But ultimately, the choice is yours. The responsibility is yours. There's no one out there, no person, no ideology, no idea, no system of government. There is no program that'll solve your real problem. That's basically what Shmuel is saying, encapsulates it with the last pasuk in Yud Bet, where he says, Ach yir'u et Adonai, fear God, v'avadetem oto, and you serve him be'emet, with truth, b'chol levavchem, kira'u et asher higdil imachem. Look how much he's done for you. Look how much opportunity he's given you. Look how much God has done for you. V'im hara tereu. If you choose evil, Gam atem, gam malkechem tisapu. You and your king, nothing will help. You'll all perish if you don't follow God. It's a bit of a sobering idea, but that's Shmuel putting into context this great inspiration and this great feeling that people have. Oh, we have a great leader, we have a great king. There is no such thing as a great leader of a people that's not great. Okay, and that's his message to them. And now, in that vein, we're going to start Shaul's major challenges as a leader of the Jewish people. So we need to read the first pasuk in first verse in chapter 13. Chavod.
בן שנה שאול במולכו ושתי שנים מלך על ישראל.
This pasuk really dumbfounds, it surprises everyone who reads it. It reads as if it's saying that Shaul was 1 year old when he ruled, and he only ruled for 2 years. We know he ruled for more than 2 years. Obviously, he was more than 1 year old. He was running after his father's escaped donkeys. He was talking to people. He was interacting. This was definitely not under 1 year old. So there's various different approaches to how to deal with this idiosyncrasy. What I find the most reasonable is Ben Shana Shaul b'molcho, meaning the story we're going to tell now. Up until now, he served as a melech for 1 year, and for 2 years he was molech al Yisrael until the end of this incident. So we're basically going to cover the first 2 years of Shaul's kingdom, and certain incidents are going to be discussed that the writer of the Tanach thought has eternal importance. Okay, now he's not being given a clear timeline in the chronology of kings here. Some see it as the writer indicating that he doesn't see Shaul as a very effective king. Shaul is kind of like like the first pancake. You make pancakes, it's never good, right? You just mess up the first pancake and the second one's good, right? Some people think it's like that with relationships and with businesses. I have nothing to say about that, right? But Shaul is treated by the Tanakh often as that first pancake, okay? So therefore, things get stuck, things don't really work well, you don't have a perfect result, right? So, the next
This was
episode.
like first test. It's like the first test.
Yeah, the first test is so that the second one isn't perfect, but the second one is better. But in typical biblical fashion, it's cyclical. The second one's better. The third one is great hope, and then the third one kind of goes down, and then goes up and down, then everything crashes, right? It's the story of a dream, of a vision of some great future, but it's never really realized in the time of the writer. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't enter the promised land. He doesn't see the people reach true success. Shmuel Navi doesn't see a proper system of government to work, to be instituted. David HaMelech doesn't see the unification of the tribes. Jeremiah doesn't really see the temple surviving. He sees it being destroyed. So all the great people of Tanakh, they, in their life cycle, did not see their ideals being realized. Sometimes that's very sad. It's very tragic. It's a tragic subplot of the whole Tanakh. But you should know that there's something very inspiring about that too. I didn't plan to say this today. Just coming to me now. So sometimes we work hard with our children, our families, with our plans in life, and we think that we don't succeed. Okay. And we can take inspiration from our forefathers, our ancestors, spiritual ancestors, genetic ancestors, that they also didn't succeed. But the fact that we're here learning those lessons today, and in many cases implementing them many years, many thousands of years after they said their piece, that's their success. So you don't always, in fact, the best of us don't see success in our lifetimes in realizing our principles. So that's just something you take into account. All right, Pasuk Bet.
Like with David, it says, also over there, it says there's a differentiation of how long he was king and how long he was king over Israel.
How long he was king over Yehuda? It says he was
Right.
7
First he
years
started
in
off,
Yehuda,
right.
in Hebron, and then another 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Yerushalayim over all of Israel. Right. Meaning it was a process before he can even call himself king of Israel.
So it could be here with Shaul, he was like 1 year in his kingship, right? But it took a while.
Oh, that's a good point.
King over Israel.
So he was
accepted.
He was appointed for a year. Yes, that's a good suggestion. I didn't think of this. Thank you. So I'm saying aloud so they hear. Okay. So Chacham Shmuel suggests, as not to be confused with Shmuel Hanavi. There's Chacham Shmuel and there's Shmuel Hanavi. They're not the same people. They're similar, but not the same. Okay. Suggests that Shana, the year that he served, doesn't say on Israel. So maybe it was like a secret kind of not so well known, not so well accepted, but it took a year for him to be accepted. And then, Shteshani Malach al Yisrael. That's pretty cool. I didn't see that anywhere, and it does fit with what we're gonna read. All right, next pasuk.
ויבחר לו שאול 3,000 ישראל, ויהיו עם שאול 2,000 במכמש ובהר בית אל, ו1,000 היו עם יונתן בגבעת בנימין, ויתר העם שלח איש לאוהליו.
So I'm gonna do the English. Shaul chooses 3,000 men from Israel, takes 2,000 to Michmas, which is somewhere on the border of Beit El, the desert, Ubahar Beit El, which is by the mountain of Beit El, Ve'elef hayu im Yonatan. He sends 1,000 men with Yonatan to the hill of Binyamin, which is further closer to Jerusalem. Ve'yeter ha'am shilach ish le'ohalav, and everyone else he sends home, but not home as in like the army telling you you're free. You're home, but you're still in Miluim. You're on call up. We call you. You're gonna have to show up. All right, so they get to be home for now. Now, one of the issues besides the first pasuk is that we're kind of thrown into a story without being given a whole lot of context. So in the next pasuk, which Chacham Shmuel is going to read,
ויך יונתן את נסיב פלישתים אשר ברבע, וישמעו פלישתים, ושאול תקע בשופר בכל הארץ לאמור, ישמעו העברים.
So who is Yonatan?
Shaul's son,
Shaul's son. How do we know this?
because of the friendship that he had
From the
with
future. So at this point, we weren't told yet who Yonatan is. We don't, those studious among us know that Yonatan is the son of Shmuel. I'm assuming that people they read this plenty of times, and there was stories that circulated among the Jews at the time, the people in Israel, and therefore it wasn't a big question who Yonatan was. He had a reputation, as we're going to soon see. So what happens is that Yonatan kills the Nitziv Philistine. Yach is to hit, but in biblical Hebrew, when you hit, strike someone and kill. Smite, otherwise known as. But Yach Yonatan et Nitziv Philistine. What's a Nitziv? When's the last time we saw the word Nitziv in Tanach? Remember Lot escaping Sodom? So when Lot escapes Sodom, his wife turns around and she becomes an Nitziv Melech. She gets like covered in this avalanche of salt, and she's just buried there, standing, and they have to keep running or they'll get buried as well. She just becomes this standing monument of salt that symbolizes the lack of faith, looking back, not looking forward, right? Nitziv is used in Hebrew usually as a someone standing in for someone. So Nitziv Plishtim is a representative, a military representative of the Plishti occupation. At that time, the Palestinians, the Plishtim, as it were, they were occupying parts of Yehuda and Israel. And at this time, again, context that we're missing, but we're going to see it in the upcoming psukim, there was this military occupation where the Israelites were not allowed to have weapons and they weren't allowed to organize, which explains why earlier Shmuel's anointing of Shaul seemed a little low-key. They didn't do this big party. He speaks to him one-on-one on a rooftop somewhere. They spent hours talking. Till now, we're not sure what they were speaking about. Maybe soon we're going to get little hints of what the discussion was earlier, right? But Shaul was appointed as a king, not by a sovereign people, but by people under occupation, under foreign occupation. They were not supposed to have kings, right? And Yonatan, apparently the plan was for Yonatan to kill the person who's the governor, the military representative of the Plishtim. Usually when they're not ready, they don't assume that there's going to be a revolt. It's a surprise revolt. So he kills them in Gibeah Binyamin. V'yishma'u Plishtim, they hear this. V'Shaul taka b'shofar b'kol haaretz. At that point, Shaul sounds the shofar in all the land. Lemor saying, Yishma'u ha'ivrim. I want the Hebrews to hear this. What's strange with the word Yishma'u ha'ivrim? Who are these Ivrim? Why are we talking about Hebrews? Till now it was Israel. You can talk about Yehuda. The term Hebrew seems a little more general, right? But it's also a different term. Is it the same people? Are they different people? Why are we using that term? So from the context of here and what we're going to see, go to the chapter 14, Pasuk, same book, Shmuel Alef, Pasuk, I think it's Kaf Aleph, right? This is in the future, later, but I want you to just look at the Pasuk itself. The Ha'ivrim, again, these Hebrews, which again, the word Hebrews and Israelites gets switched around a few times in this chapter, and this is how I understand it. Va'ivrim hayu leplishtim ke'etumol shilshom. They were with the Plishtim as before. Asher alu imam b'machane saviv v'gam. They were with them in the camp, in the military camp surrounding the land. V'gam hema liot im Yisrael asher im Shaul v'Yonatan. And they switched back to going with Shaul and Yonatan. So the context that we're missing in this part of the story is that oftentimes when people are occupied in the ancient world, they get inducted at a young age and drafted to fight for their occupiers. So there was, just like people don't maybe not know this, but there was Jewish legions fighting for Rome even during the destruction of the temple. There was people who were born Jews, some of them even keeping kosher, destroying the temple for Rome. It was today we can't imagine that, but that happened then, and here in this time as well. So Shaul is trying to start a revolt and appeal with the shofar with this ancient sound of this Judean hilltop sound. You have sheep and you have these ram horns, and that's and then the Hebrew fighters forced into slavery, fighting for their masters, will hear that sound and they'll know there's a revolt, and it'll inspire them to join this revolt. So this is basically the beginning of the revolt against the Plishtim. Okay, that's how I understand it. That pasuk from other pasukim is going to make sense now. Why sometimes we talk about Yisrael and Plishtim. Yisrael are those that are still Israelites; they're being oppressed, and the Ivrim, the Hebrews, are the ones that are were pressed into service by the Plishti overlords. Okay, so that's this pasuk. Let's do the next one. Back to where we were, 13, verse 4.
וכל ישראל שמעו לאמור, היכה שאול את נציב פלישתים, וגם נבאש ישראל בפלישתים, ויזעקו העם אחרי שאול הגלגל.
So it looks like the plan didn't work yet. Okay, something similar like today. Imagine United States and Israel are bombing Iran, right? And the plan was, the hope was that the Iranian people will rise up and rebel, because they'll, right? Now, it didn't happen. Now, there are many reasons. We don't know why it didn't happen. The story, we're still in the middle of that story, not over yet. It could be that many want to, but they're scared. It could be that the government killed all the rebels earlier. We don't know. At this point, we see that it did inspire all the Israelites. So the people that are still oppressed, they want to join the war. The Jews that are in the Plishti forces, we don't know anything about them yet. Okay, they're not mentioned. It's not mentioned here that this affected them. My assumption is it didn't. The word I didn't translate the pasuk. But Kol Yisrael, all of Israel hears, saying, "Hikash Shaul et Nitziv Plishtim." Shaul killed the military governor of the Plishtim. V'gam niv'ash Yisrael bePlishtim. And now Israel is niv'ash. The word niv'ash means it's like when you smell rotten food, you're disgusted. So the Jews are now disgusted by Plishtim. They were always not, didn't like them, but now they were inspired to rebel. They were disgusted by the oppression, by being held down, and now they want to fight back, right? V'yitz'aku am acharei Shaul hagilgal. They all, yitz'ak is to yell, but they all, imagine ancient war cries, they're all rushing in to join this war.
This kind of reminds us of Yaakov when his sons with Shechem, right? Yaakov gets mad at his sons for taking revenge against Shechem. Says Lavi Ishenu beyoshvei ha'aretz.
To make them hate me, yes. It's
Uses
like
the same word.
it's from like now we're rotten in your, in your eyes. We're
Now
hated.
going to come and attack.
Now, in more context is needed, which we're going to later see proof of. Again, this is some of my issues with how these chapters are put together. These people have an arms embargo, maybe, or they don't really have weapons. So they're fighting, but they're fighting with farm implements, they're fighting with stones, they don't have a real military ability to fight. Uplishtim.
ופלישתים נאספו להילחם עם ישראל 30,000 רכב ו6,000 פרשים ועם ככל אשר על שפת הים לרוב ויעלו ויחנו במכמס קדמת בית אבן.
The Plishtim gather to wage war in Israel. 30,000 chariots, 6,000 cavalry horses. They have a nation, I guess, foot soldiers. They didn't even bother counting. You just see them, it looks like looking at the ocean. It doesn't end. They rise up, they camp at Michmas, which is somewhere near Beit El, Kidmat Beit Aven. And they're getting ready for this big war. You killed our military officer, you killed our Nitziv, we're going to destroy you. Now, notice that the Plishtim are a very heavy force. They have 6,000 chariots is a lot. It's very expensive to run 6,000 chariots. And 6,000 chariots?
Yeah.
No, sorry, it was
30,000.
30,000 chariots. It's a very expensive project. And 6,000 6,000 cavalry, 6,000 horses. We know that there's a biblical, I don't know if we read this last week or the week before, but we read the laws of the kings in Devarim and Deuteronomy. The king can't have too many horses, right? Why can't we have too many horses?
Because he gets faster with this. No, it's expensive.
What
Also,
does
they
what does the
can
Torah say? Good point. But what does the Torah say? Why does the Torah say you can't have a horse? Who knows?
Because they start
Not a
having
horse, too many horses.
the horses instead of Hashem.
Those are all
They-
you both said true good things, which we can discuss. But what does the pasuk say? Don't give me like a Jewish from answer. Give me what does the Torah say? No, in Devarim, right? When the law of the kings, look it up. Remember where in Devarim you have Chukei HaMelech. Yes, pasuk says don't have too many horses because the Egyptians had a lot of horses. You don't want to go down that path like Egyptians. Right? That's what it seems to say. Now you'll notice from here on throughout Shmuel, Alef, Bet, and Melachim, our enemies oftentimes have enormous cavalries. We never have a cavalry. This law we've kept, okay? And oftentimes it looks like we have a strategic disadvantage, even a tactical disadvantage, because we don't have cavalry and they do. A horse riding into battle is terrifying. It's a very powerful tool. It's like a tank. Now, I heard three good reasons why one shouldn't have horses besides what the Torah said, right? The Torah says not to be like Egypt. The question about just on the Torah's commandment itself is, okay, we don't want to be like Egypt, so on Pesach we don't eat like bread, we eat matzah, which is our like Hebrew desert shepherd quick like bread that we make. We slaughter the lamb because we're showing that we don't accept their idea of divinity. But over here we're being asked to take upon ourselves a very severe military disadvantage in order not to be like them. And that seems a little harsh. Now, someone here mentioned, oh, we got to trust God. But imagine we were told today, you should trust God, don't have tanks. That's a big ask to have. If you're in a situation where your survival is being threatened and you're being told to trust God and give up on an important tool, survival, you need a little more than, oh, I just trust God as like some sort of like rule. Plus, we all know that it's pikuach nefesh, right? What's pikuach nefesh in halacha? It's a escape cause for any halacha. It's a legitimate one, right? For pikuach nefesh, you could eat on Yom Kippur, you could be mechalel Shabbat. So soldiers do guard duty on Shabbat. We don't say, oh, trust God, and on Shabbat don't turn on the radio or don't drive your. No, we drive right, on Shabbat. So obviously, if we need to have horses, we would. So the commandment is a bit superfluous, right? Like you're being told to do something, which if you had to do it, you would do it anyway. So what's the purpose of it? It's something that it's worth mentioning, and I'll share with you what I found. Okay, this is something I didn't make this up. I heard it from one of my teachers many years ago, and it stuck with me, and I'm going to share it with you today. So, how many of you have ridden horses before?
Very well.
You weren't good at it?
I did when I was like a teenager.
How long does it take to get good at riding a horse?
Very long. It depends on the people. Whatever.
You need a what?
Need to practice.
You need to practice, you need to train, you need to train the horse, you need to train yourself. If you stop on the horse, exactly, needs to get used to you. The same horse, he knows you. The next person he can ride, but not as well, right? Horses can be very unpredictable. Takes a lot of training. To have a cavalry, and this has been proven in military history of the world, it's an enormous drain. That's what you started mentioning earlier. It's an enormous drain on the economy of the country. Okay. And once you have a cavalry force, and this has been proven over time, you reach a situation where in order to maintain a military force that can ride into battle, you have to have a military industrial complex, because if they're not working, if they're not producing, if you're not being attacked, and tomorrow you get attacked and you go out to ride, your horses won't be useful at all. All they'll be good for is carrying stuff to the battlefield, and you got to get off and fight because the horse will kill you because he can't handle warfare, right? Because you need to constantly train, you need to constantly get used to it, and you can't really do anything else. You need to have a professional force. You can't have what we have in Israel, which is a mostly reserve force. And what happens when countries and empires have extremely expensive giant militaries, and those militaries don't have justification for their continued funding? What do?
They go to other countries to get their fund, buy horses.
There's no money. How do they afford the horse?
They just start waging war.
What?
Start waging war.
First of all, they need to create wars to justify their budget, right? And then the government has to make a decision. Okay, so I have these like rockets and they cost millions, and at some point we can't use them anymore, so I got to shoot them, right? So a certain type of military buildup, it's going to create a military industrial complex, which ultimately means that in order to justify the military, you need to constantly create wars that will pay for itself, and then you have to dominate other countries and take their things, their resources, and that's a never-ending cycle of violence that ends up oppressing the people of the same country. People who live in these, in these empires, they don't necessarily live better, and if they do, it's at a very high ethical, moral price. So when the Torah says you don't want to be like Egyptians, you don't want to have that kind of situation. And now, still, you have a problem, because if you're attacked by a cavalry force, then you're at a disadvantage. So what are you supposed to do? Not have a counter cavalry force? So historically, the militaries, not necessarily biblical militaries, even European militaries, ancient Rome, they reached that point of being the best when they overcame the need for cavalry. When they came up with tactics and strategies to fight without cavalry, they invested less money in a good infantry force, and they managed to overcome cavalry. And then their enemies had to pay for more cavalry, so they ended up defeating their enemies without having cavalry, if you can figure out how to handle it. Much of the military history we're going to see now in Tanach as well are the attempts of the Hebrews, the Israelites, the Judeans, to fight as not as a professional army, but as a reserve-based army. We just had Yom Yerushalayim when I was like 20 years old, and I just heard this Kiddush for the first time. I was in Merkaz Rav Yeshiva, and Ehud Barak was the defense minister, and he came to the yeshiva at that time, because the defense minister used to go to, I don't know if they still do that, like for Yom Yerushalayim, and he was chatting with the boys, and I was one of the boys, and I told him this. I told him, why don't we have a cavalry? He knows a lot of Tanakh. It was interesting. And he said, because the Torah says, but I said, I did this whole thing I told you guys. And at that time, he was pushing to turn Israel's military into a purely professional force. He was saying Israel should be he called it tzava katan v'chacham. We want to have a highly technical, extremely proficient military and get rid of reserve duty. He wanted the army to be a professional army, not a reserve one. And I'm a big believer in reserves, so in citizen armies. And I made this argument, and I used my 2 minutes with the defense minister at the time to make this argument. He didn't stop his project, but it failed because of the wars. It was a terrible idea. The country dropped it, but at that time it was very promising. He had a whole group of officers that were behind him. They were trying to push this idea. In general, the gist of the biblical ethics of running a country and running a military is to always be a people's army and not to fall into professional military. And therefore you see the Plishtim are being described as having this giant cavalry. It's not just, oh, it was a miracle, we beat them, we were weaker. It's cavalry is bad. Cavalry creates, or a military industrial complex is bad. It creates conditions that actually destroy the country and the regions around it. So I just wanted to bring that up. The next pasuk Vav.
ואיש ישראל ראו כי שר לו כי נגס העם ויתחבאו העם במערות ובחבכים ובסלעים ובסריחים ובבורות.
So anyone who's hiked in the area of Binyamin around Beit El, anywhere from Jericho to Jerusalem, how many of you have done those hikes? Some of you. So, we have a soldier here, so he's done it. Pline or should do a trip there. What do you think? Should do like a trip, a hike. Summer's coming. So one of those in this area to get a better picture of it. I mean, basically, these very steep mountains and valleys. There's caves everywhere, very jagged, very rough, dangerous territory. Not a very pleasant place to go. Usually, the armies would march high along the top of the hills, and they would look down. That place is just, you don't want to go there. You just like Sa'il Azazel. If you fall there, you won't be able to survive it, right? So the people, the Jewish fighters, they see this enormous force. They hide in all these places, and they just don't know how they're going to deal with this military threat. Okay. So what we mentioned here is Ish Yisrael, again, not the Ivrim, not the forces that were pressed into Philistine, but the Israelite forces. They see that it's hard, Sarlo, they see that it's narrow, they can't make it through this war. They start hiding in the caves, Havachim. I'm not sure what Havachim are, but it's a type of, someone who lives in this area would know the difference between this kind of cave or that kind of cave. Ubaselaim, and in the rocks, ubatzrichim, and in the turrets, ubabarot, and in the what's the word? Pits, right? Pasuk Zayin.
והעברים עברו את הירדן ארץ גן וגלעד ושאול עודנו בגלגל וכל העם חרדו אחריו.
So again, Ivrim are mentioned. What are they doing? They are going across the Jordan through Gad and Gilad. So they're not hiding, they're fine, which is why I believe that, like other commentators, not just myself, that the Ivrim are not our friends at this point. They're our brothers, they're our kinsmen, but they're still pressed into service, they're still serving in the Philistine army. Shaul is in the Gilgal, and the whole nation, Kol ha'am haradu achara, they are in terror. They're behind him, they're looking up to him, but what to do, but they're completely terrified.
ויחל שבעת ימים למועד אשר שמואל ולא בא שמואל הגלגל ויפס העם מעליו.
So the tension here, you can feel it. 7 days, the Plishtim have amassed this never-ending force. The soldiers that were once, we couldn't call them soldiers, guerrillas, these rebels, are hiding in the caves. Shaul has a nation of terrified people behind him. They're waiting for Shmuel. Why are they waiting for Shmuel? What's supposed to happen? They're supposed to, Shmuel earlier in previous, we wait for 7 days, we're going to bring sacrifices, and then we're going to continue. So they're waiting for the korbanot, and the people, people, they start leaving Shaul. He starts losing the goodwill, the trust, the people going after him, blindly going after your leader, they start leaving. Okay, go on.
ויאמר שאול הגישו אלי העולה בשלמים ויעל העולה.
So Shaul, in desperation, sees, he's looking behind him, and he sees he's losing the trust of his people. He's losing not their loyalty, but their willingness to fight for him, their faith in him. Okay, and he says, just bring the olah and the shlamim. What's an olah and a shlamim? What's an olah?
Sacrifice.
It's a sacrifice that you burn completely. And what's a shlamim? That's a sacrifice that you eat part of.
Peace.
Shlamim means peace, true, like whole. But the difference in olah and shlamim is an olah is a sacrifice that you burn the whole behemoth, the whole animal, and shlamim is one part of it gets burnt and part of it you eat, and it becomes like a ceremony where you're whole with God. You go to the mikveh, you purify yourself, and you're part of the sacrificial ritual. It brings both olah and shlamim. Vayal ha'olah. And now they bring up the olah. When they sacrifice the olah in ancient time, that smell and the visual of it, that was an inspiring religious act that was, symbolizes devotion to God, connection to God. That's how we prayed. That's how we this is how, that was the religious thing you did. Okay, you bring an Olah and Shlamim and you waited. Usually, you wait for the prophet to do it. The king is not supposed to, or the priest, right? The king is not supposed to do that, really, right? But he, in desperation, does that in order to keep people from leaving. It's kind of tragic. Go on.
ויהי ככלותו להעלות העולה, והנה שמואל בא, ויצא שאול לקראתו לברכו.
So as he's finished, the Olah is burning and he's finished burning, and then Shmuel shows up, like just at the end of the seventh day or the beginning of the eighth day. He was late.
ויאמר שמואל מה עשית? ויאמר שאול כי ראיתי כי נפש העם מעלי ואתה לא באת למועד הימים ופלישתים נאספים למכמש.
So Shaul gives him a straight answer. I was waiting for you. Yes, this is your job to initiate this sacrifice ritual. But I couldn't wait. The people were leaving. People were losing hope. We have this giant war to do. I just made a decision last minute and I decided to do it. All right? Seems pretty reasonable under the circumstance, right? Doesn't seem such a bad thing. That's not what Shmuel thinks.
ואומר עתה ירדו פלישתים אלי הגלגל ופני אדוני לא כיניתי ואתאפק ועלה העולה.
I think you just read that, no? You read it?
No,
So
explain the word.
yeah, so he explains that the Philistine came to the Gilgal. I didn't Pnei Adonai lo chiliti. I didn't receive the face of God. Now, the word face of God in Tanach is usually when you go to Jerusalem and when the temple was built, or to the Mishkan and you bring a sacrifice and you purify yourself. That was considered like not seeing, but receiving the face of God. That was your spiritual experience, right? So I couldn't go to this war without having this experience, right? So I brought the Olah. Go on.
ויאמר שמואל אל שאול השכלת לא שמרת את מצוות אדוני אלוהיך אשר ציווה כי עתה הכין אדוני את ממלכתך אל ישראל עד עולם.
So Shmuel seems at first glance unnecessarily harsh. He tells Shaul, who's obviously in a desperate situation, he's facing a challenge that none of us want to be in, and he tells him, you didn't keep the commandment of God, you rebelled basically. God gave you the option to have an everlasting kingdom, and you messed it up. Ve'ata.
ועתה ממלכתך לא תקום ביקש אדוני לו איש כלבבו ויסבהו אדוני לנגיד על עמו כי לא שמרת את אשר ציווך אדוני.
So now your kingdom will not stand, right? It won't last. God is going to find someone after his own heart, someone else. And he will command him to be the leader. Again, he doesn't like the word king. He always uses nagid. Shmuel is an anti-monarchist, right? Very tough exchange. Shmuel doesn't seem to be cutting this new king, been around for 2 years, doesn't seem to be cutting him any slack in very difficult circumstances, right? Now, we just read these psukim from Pasuk Tet Yud, from maybe Chet, from Pasuk Chet from verse 8 until verse 14, 6 verses. Look at it again and think what other incident in the entire Tanakh that you already read. I know you read it. What does it remind you of? What does it indicate? Look for a similarity, not just here, but in general. When you study Tanakh, if the Tanakh is telling a story in a similar fashion, using similar keywords, similar structures, similar sequence of events, it's trying to make a connection between the two and is leaving it for you to find it. Think.
I remember what's the it's connected with when the big wife and the treatment the treatment Benjamin they got like a the problem with the Levian wife of the big. Remember that?
The
They
Vid,
cut in the 12 pieces.
yeah, with the Gilegesh Begiva. What similarity?
That because I said, why is the test is not passed? But I remember before, and I read that, and I said, this is what a big problem passed before. So after, like,
Is there an incident that's even more similar sequence?
I can try. I don't know.
Try.
Right? Shofar 6:6, when they had a problem with Midian, and then Gidon, like when the angel appeared to Gidon, he was hiding, like
He didn't want to do it.
he didn't want to do it. He was like threshing wheat where you smash the grapes, something like that. That's
So that is a similarity to Shaul, where he didn't feel worthy. But in this incident, I'll make it a little more clear. Okay, this is not a test; it's a training. Okay, so you have over here a very tense, emotional, spiritual time. Big changes are happening. The prophet promises a revelation, a divine revelation, right? Something is supposed to happen, and it's taking time. It's not happening. And then when it doesn't happen, the people or someone among the people take initiative, and initiative in spiritual matters. Yes. Okay, go to it's the book of Shemot, Exodus, Lamed Bet. Shemot. Exodus 32. So the 10 Commandments are given. Moses promises to come on the 40th day. The people are going to have the Mishkan. They're going to have their Kiruvim. They're going to have the Ark of the Covenant. We're going to have a tabernacle where we can worship, where we can sacrifice, where we can live out our spiritual destiny. Okay? And Lamed Bet, Pasuk Aleph, Vayar Ha'am. Avod.
וירא העם כי בושש משה לרדת מן ההר, ויקהל העם על אהרון, ויאמרו אליו קום, עשה לנו אלוהים, אשר ילכו לפנינו, כי זה משה האיש, אשר העלנו מארץ מצרים, לא ידענו והיה לו.
So the nation, 40 days pass, right? They're expecting something. It doesn't happen. They go to Aharon. What do they tell Aharon? This man Moshe, who was supposed to lead us, he's not here. Let's make another god. Now, this is a very extreme example, but it's something similar between these two incidents, right? We were given very specific instructions by God of how to worship and how to administer our spiritual lives, our relationship with God. But now we want to start making changes. We want to make God because Moshe hasn't arrived, right? Go on.
ויאמר עליהם אהרון פרקו מזבח זהב אשר תאזני שכם מלכם ובנותיכם והביאו אלי. ויתפרקו כל העם את מזבח זהב אשר תאזניהם ויביאו אל אהרון.
So Aaron is clearly he's not taking strong leadership position. But again, he never was appointed for that task, and he never applied for it. He's whatsoever. He's stalling for time. Go bring your wife's jewelry. Whose wife is gonna give away her jewelry so that you can go create a new god, right? This should take some time, right? Go on.
ויקח מידם ויאסר אותו בחרת ויעשהו אבן מסכה ויאמרו אל אלוהיך ישראל אשר העלוך לארץ מצרים.
So the pasuk just says they took it. Commentaries think they took it by force. So people were fighting their wives, taking their jewelry away, right? Jewelry they brought with them from Egypt, and they made the golden calf, the famous story that we have. The writer of Shmuel wants you to see the connection, and there's a connection here. Let's go back to Shmuel. Before we go back, wait. I want to see if there was something else here that I wanted you to see. No, it's enough for now. Back to what? So over here also, Shmuel told Shaul in the previous chapters that you wait for 7 days, I come and I'm going to do the sacrifice. Now, it's not because Shmuel loves doing sacrifices, and it's not because he needs to hold on to his power. It's much more than that. The government, the king, is not supposed to be we have a saying in Talmud, Shlosha ketarim hem. Remember the saying? There are 3 crowns. There's keter kehuna. Keter kehuna goes to Aharon ubanav, right? It's been relegated to Aharon. There's keter malchut that goes to Yehuda, David HaMelech, Shlomo ubanav. That is the malchut, the kingdom. But keter Torah is for everyone, right? You're not supposed to, whenever you notice throughout Tanach, not just here, that we are very sensitive to when these crowns, the 2 crowns of Kehuna and Malchut, are confused. You don't want the king to be the priest. You don't want the government to control religion or to control people via religion. You don't want to have a state religion that just runs everything, and the government is the king is the pope, like in the Anglican Church back in the day. It's still like that, but when they took it seriously, you need to have 2 separate, what we call religion. Religion wasn't invented yet the way it is today, but the Navi is not the king, and the king is not the Navi. And even if the king has Nivuah, he's not a Navi. He has Nivuah as a spiritual experience. He always needs a Navi to criticize him, to stand before him and tell him and the priests and the nation and the nobility and the military and everyone when they're not okay. When you mix these 2 things, what do we become like? Like Egypt. Egypt had this pyramid of power, no pun intended, right? There was a king, but he has this class of priests, a priestly class that rules the people for him. They have land that can never be taxed. They have militias, you can't mess with them, right? Because religion is a very important element in controlling people by telling them that the king is king because of the right, God's divine right, and that's why if you trust in God, you must trust your king. That's a way for him to control people, to basically hold people down. It goes against like the heart of hearts of the monotheistic ideals of the Torah. That's why Shmuel doesn't want to even call it a king. He called it a Nagid. And that's why it's important that the king doesn't perform the sacrificial act. That's why in Talmud, the Chachamim, even though the Maccabees and the Asmoneans were great warriors and great heroes, at some point they were expected to divest from their power as rulers that they got because they defeated the Greeks, but they were expected to divest of that and give it over to Yehuda. And by them not doing it, they lost the loyalty of the Chachamim. That's just why until today, the rabbis, we still have Hanukkah, but they kind of switched from the military victory. They started stressing the candles more. And it wasn't just the candles, it was a pure vial of oil, which rabbinically is forbidden, which the other ones were rabbinically forbidden. So it's to point out that they took power that they didn't really deserve. That's the undercurrent, the subtext of what you see here. So when Shmuel is saying by committing the sacrifice, you've proven these are terrible act, it's not it's not because he committed a sacrifice and he shouldn't do it. It's more because he's using the human religious drive as a tool to do what? To get people to continue following him. It's important for people to follow him, but you got to keep these two things separate under all circumstances. And it's a pretty harsh message, but that's what you see from these psukim, and the Tanakh wants you to consider it almost like Chet HaEgel. It's not the same thing. They're not worshiping a golden calf, but by having the government control the relationship to God, that is also idolatry.
So what you say is, when you say like, shall we try to control the religion? They have the power of the king now.
I don't know if he was desperate and he was in a tough situation. He did the best he can, but that's something that's supposed to be sacred. You're supposed to leave that to the priestly class, to the prophet. You're not supposed to take that over. And everywhere in Tanakh where you see a king tries to become the priest, the Tanakh gets really upset at him. It's the worst. You should never do that. Right? It's not the only time, but this is the first time you see it as a recurring theme throughout Tanakh. Right? So again, the concept of idolatry, which is the big enemy of the Torah from Bereshit until the end of Tanakh, it has several forms. It's not just bowing down to idols, it's also idolizing humans. It's also not separating between the king and the priest. Okay? So that's what we had so far. I think we can go to the next pasuk.
ויקום שמואל ויעל מן הגלגל גבעת בנימין ויפקוד שאול את העם הנמצאים עמו 600 איש.
So Shmuel leaves, and Shaul does a count of how many forces he has with him, and he has 600 men with him. Situation isn't good. I know we're running out of time, but I can't leave you guys with this cliffhanger, can I? So we're going to have to do a few more psukim. Chavod.
ושאול ויונתן בנו והעם הנמצא עמם יושבים בגבע בנימין ופלישתים חנו במחמס.
So Shaul and Jonathan and the 600 men are in Gibeah Binyamin. This is the stronghold of the Benjaminite forces. The Plishtim are still in Michmas, but this is going to be a showdown. The Plishtim didn't go there to camp out forever. They're here for a war, and they're going to get their war. Go on.
ויצא המשחית ממחנה פלישתים 3 ראשים, הראש האחד יפנה אל דרך עופרה אל ארץ שועל.
Let's do the next one as well.
והראש האחד יפנה דרך בית חורון, והראש האחד יפנה דרך הגבול הנשקף על גיא סבועים המדברה.
So again, let's do for the beginning. Yod Zayin 17, Samuel 13, Samuel A, chapter 13, verse 17. Vayetzeh hamashchit. Now, in Tanakh, the word mashchit is a destroyer. It's used for like the angel of death. It's used for plague. It's terrifying force that the shock troops, the infantry forces that come forward, they're out there from the Plishtim. They attack, and they attack from 3 directions. They're surrounding the 600 men of Shaul, who's in Gibeah Binyamin, and I can't draw the map well because I'm not great at this, but maybe we do a trip to what we discussed. We can go to these places and see them, and they go out to attack. And now the book is going to take a little break from the war and give you the background that I told you about earlier that you should know about this, right? Yotet. As if this isn't bad enough, let's read Yotet.
וחלש לא ימסה בכל ארץ ישראל, כי אמרו פלישתים, פן יעשו העברים חרב וחנית.
So there's no blacksmith in all of Israel, because the Plishtim, back then when they invaded, they said, we don't want the Hebrews, which they ended up appropriating, but this is when they just came. We don't want them to have any weapons, so they shouldn't have any ideas of attacking us. Historically, we also know that the Philistine had superior technology for copper. They had a type of copper that we didn't really know how to process yet. So even if we did have weapons, it wouldn't be the same quality as theirs. And that's important, because if your metal is brittle and it breaks, you can't have a longer weapon. It would break too fast. Like, you have to have a shorter one, so there's less range. Your shields won't work so well. You're just at a technological disadvantage. But and besides for that, in order to keep that technology among themselves and to have just they're having weapons, they just outlawed all blacksmiths in Israel.
וירדו כל ישראל הפלשתים לנטוש איש את מחרשתו ואת עתו ואת קרדומו ואת מחרשתו.
So the situation was, not only did they not have weapons and blacksmiths, if they had farm implements like plows and pitchforks and such, axes, they needed to go to Plishtim to have them sharpened or to have them serviced. Right? So, go on.
והייתה בסירה פיו למחרשות ולעתים ולשלוש כלשון ולקרדומים ולהסיב הדורבן.
So, in the past, people weren't clear what these things mean. Okay, Vaita Pitzira. What's Pitzira? We'll get to that. Pim, we're going to get that as well. The Machareshot. Macharesha, we know, means a plowing implement. La'etim, which is another farming thing. It is like what we call a pickaxe. Lishlosh kilshon, which is a three-pronged pitchfork, which we use. Ulha-kardumim, and axes. Ulha-tziv hadurban. Now, Pim, we know today from archaeological digging that it's a type of coin. It's a type of what was used to measure metal, a type of like weight, right? So, and Vaita Pitzira Pim lemachareshot. So there was a value, a very high value for every metal instrument. And even metal instruments that we had, they needed to be serviced by Philistine. We were basically an unarmed people, okay? Go on.
והיה ביום המלחמת ולא נמצא חרב ומחנית ביד כל העם אשר את שאול ואת יונתן ותימסר לשאול וליונתן בנו.
So that day, weapons were so rare, the only people that had actual swords was the king and his son, was Shaul and Yonatan. Go on.
ויצא מסע פלשתים אל מעבר מכמש.
So the force of Plishtim leaves Ma'avar Michmas, and the battle begins, which we're going to begin next week. That's it. Thank you so much.
We have a whole week.